Glenn, welcome back to another edition of Sponsorship Unpacked. Obviously, we like to throw some discussion topics on the table for those who are considering the sponsorship side of their sports club or sports organisation and just debate it and discuss it. Something we do daily is obviously get out in the market and sell sponsorship on behalf of our clients. And so we're in a pretty good place to be able to discuss this, and particularly yourself. You're the general manager of Whitewall Sport, and daily you're having conversations on behalf of our clients in a sponsorship space. So, firstly, welcome and looking forward to our discussion topic today, which we'll talk about in a second. But how are you going, Glenn?
Good, mate. Good. Always looking forward to these. There's so much that we know. There's so much that we come across. Just being able to pass out these little bits of helpful information is something we're pretty proud of and interested in. So let's get into this topic. And it's an interesting one, Andy, because as sponsorship based agency where we're trying to help community clubs look for sponsors and connect them with sponsors, what we find is that we often talk to an individual who maybe is a bit business minded, maybe is a bit sales minded, or is maybe wearing the pain of trying to get the sponsors themselves. And once we talk through our service with them, they then go back into the committee and look for approval. And that is where I feel the struggles kick in.
It is. So today's topic is what's holding the club committee back from the sponsorship growth. So, you're right, it's something we come across every day. We have conversations from a new client perspective who will love the program, want to change, want to shift the needle, as I call it, move the needle for the club from a sponsorship point of view, but they're stuck because they're a volunteer, they've got jobs, they've got families, they're probably a coach, or they've got another role on the committee or something like that. They go to the committee. The committee often will say no because they're probably stuck in a different thought pattern to what sponsorship is and what it should be. And so we'll have to sort of unpack that today and we've got a few points to work through. One thing I do find interesting is that there is, let's start with this. An old school mentality that still floats around within sport. And we even see that with higher level clients. So it could be professional clients, or it could be semi-pro style sports clubs or sports organizations, or it could be higher level community clubs. But this notion that either volunteers can do it and we can have or someone can come and do it on commission. And at the same time, in the same committee meeting, when these types of things are all being discussed or in the same conversations, there's often a discussion around spending heavily on a digital program, a new website, um, a new coach, a new assistant coach, new players. And so there's always we always see that conundrum, and the feedback that might come back to us is that the committee aren't prepared to do this because they want to spend money on players or whatever it is. So love to hear your thoughts. You've had a lot of these conversations as well.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And I've got to admit, I've been in the committee. So I've been the person who actually brought an idea into the committee, and I've had the struggle of that conversation with the committee. And there is a mentality. Most sports clubs are not flush with money. They don't, they don't get a lot in. There's a lot to spend. So things like players' fees, facilities, coaches, etc. So they are in a mentality of needing to spend as little as possible or spend very, very, very wisely. So when you start talking about sponsorships, there is someone often or at times allocated to try and get sponsors, but they're time poor. So as all committee members typically are, and they don't have the 15 plus hours a week that it might take to go and identify a sponsor and being able to have those conversations and land them. So that mentality is completely understandable. The thing that we continue to look to challenge committees with and clubs with is everyone is time poor, and it is something that needs to be addressed. And there is an opportunity. So if we can help support a club to build sponsorship over time, then what it does is it builds up the amount of money that you can bring in, the amount of revenue that you can bring in, and it brings in the benefits. And something, Andy, maybe you can talk about is a strategy over time, because I know a lot of clubs, certainly, and a lot of people we talk to when you get to the committee level, it's okay, I need to spend this money now and I want this exact payoff, or I want to see a short-term payoff. Maybe you can talk to the benefit of a long-term strategy and how that can help in a committee conversation.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because you would you would think that there'd be a natural leaning towards thinking potentially longer term and what's possible, but at the same time, often in committee meetings, because everybody's time poor, everyone is rushed in the way they're making decisions, there's always an urgent need, whether it's a player, a coach, something to refurb the ground, whatever it is. People are often making decisions based on the here and now and are not thinking too far into the future. So I think I've probably had meetings, conversations, done presentations to literally hundreds and hundreds of clubs over the last 20 years. And by far and away, those who have been most receptive to investment and adapting their sponsorship campaign approach or their sponsorship department approach has been those who are forward thinking and thinking multi years ahead, as opposed to just thinking about the here and now. My view is that committees and directors and boards, the higher you go up the sporting chain, their role is to think longer term. And so that's one of the things that I feel like often holds people back, not from the actual day-to-day of the sponsorship campaign, but in being able to think differently around something like the sponsorship sprint, which is one of our programs that we offer, because yes, there is a small investment, but if you take it from a long-term perspective, like a lot of our clients do, and that's the reason why they purchase the program, they do see it from a 2 to 3 to 4 year perspective because they know that the world has changed and no longer is it okay to continue to rely heavily on internal networks, which often clubs run on, um, or volunteer time to get out and bang on doors and do the cold calling because quite simply, you've got kids, you've got other roles. So yeah, it is a conundrum for committees, but the reality is that those who are advancing as clubs tend to take that longer term approach.
Yeah, so that internal network is certainly always the first step, Andy, where a club goes, well, hang on, I know Barry who's a building supplier, and I know Mary who's in the an accountant. Let's lean on them and get them to pay some sponsorship money and get some advertising. That's good, but it runs out of runway pretty quickly, like we said. And picking up on your other point around the long term, what we find is the clubs that succeed the best have that mentality of the first engagement and the first step into sponsorship. We're looking to certainly look to break even, but establish ourselves, create some sponsor collateral, create the processes, and have sponsors in there that we start to add value. Then next year you build on top of that, and you might build into more sponsors, higher prices maybe, and more value that you provide to the sponsors. And over 2, 3 years, then you build that up, because it's easy to look at a club that looks like they're flying, looks like they've got all the sponsors in the world and all the revenue that they need, but guaranteed they didn't do that overnight.
Correct. Yeah, it does take time. Exactly. And often, from our point of view, they're some of our best clients where they've already built it to a certain level and they just want to keep going and they know that they just want to keep maintaining it and they need a new flow of conversations happening to maintain the level that they're at. Um, so I think that's really important. So it's one thing for me to be able to sit here and say I've presented to this many people, I've had discussions with boards, etc. But you have been at the committee table and on multiple occasions, and you are seeing those conversations play out. There is definitely an element of we can't spend money to make money, but you can spend money to buy players and buy coaches. I'd love to just dig a little deeper because that is one thing for me for years and years and years that has always been a bit of an interesting position that committees do take. They're prepared to risk paying players who may or may not perform, may or may not get injured, for trophies and developing what they see as results and that may or may not happen, but they're not prepared to spend the money specifically on trying to find sponsors. Um, so, except obviously from a commission perspective, which is retrospective, I'm super interested in that because there's no question in my mind from my background and the things I've been involved in previously, the very best businesses, the very best sports clubs will spend money on their commercial side of the business because they know if they do certain things, it plays out that they will then drive further revenue, which then in turn helps them invest further into other things like players and coaches.
Yeah, it's it's understandably difficult, I'd say, because not everybody in a committee has run a business or is super business minded. When you've got a bucket of money, you look at your account as a committee and you say, well, I know I need to buy this, buy balls, buy players, coaches, etc. I know that that's a here and now that I need to do. I have got revenue coming in, and that's typically and usually solely through membership fees or joining fees type thing. So you do have those. So you allocate that money to that outcome, and you see what's exactly in front of you. So it's completely understandable that taking a bit of a broader stance and looking at how do you do this how do you build this up over a long period of time, invest to make, it's all challenges. So as a bit of advice maybe for those business people who do understand and do get a sense of the bigger picture, the conversation into the committee might be about laying out that 3-year plan. It might be a conversation around looking at the investment that it would take from the volunteers. Because often I've heard from a committee perspective, someone say, "Why would we do that? Why would we spend money? Why don't we just do it ourselves?" And you're the sponsorship lead, can't you do it? And that's overwhelming, and it's also difficult from an outcome perspective because of the time or the inability to dedicate that time. So, Andy, I think it's understandable, but it's also it's resolvable by spelling out the bigger picture, spelling out that long term, and sort of pointing out what is ultimately, I guess, the bleeding obvious that we just don't, as a committee, have the time to spend.
Yeah. And I think so that comes down to probably a lack of understanding, just and that without nobody's fault or anything like that is probably just in many cases a lack of understanding about what it actually takes to develop revenue, solid revenue coming through. So if we were to talk about a couple of takeaways, then it's about probably the education side of things for the committee. So whoever is, if the sponsorship person is saying we need to do something different here, we need to, go outside, knock on doors in a different way because we've exhausted our networks. It's about taking the committee on a journey, and that's one thing I've found certainly over the many, many, many conversations I've had is it's important to be able to take a committee when they're making a decision which is outside of the norm, is outside of what they would ordinarily decide on. You've got to take them on a journey, help them understand the rationale as to why, and you do tend to get some sort of traction when that does happen, and also take them on the journey, not from where you've just come from and where you are now, but actually talk about what the future can look like if you do these things here. So it's painting the picture of what the negative side of things may look like. If we keep doing what we're doing, this is what the result is likely going to be. Or if you start doing something differently and maybe in a more professional way, then it could look like this. So I think it does feel like there's that conversation for someone who wants to make change from a sponsorship manager's point of view, and they want to influence the committee and help the committee make those decisions. They're probably the couple of key points.
Love it, Andy. And of course, we are always happy to take a call for anyone struggling with this, both into a committee or certainly the president or the sponsorship lead. Happy to talk this through and happy to sort of brainstorm it on a case by case.
Glenn, as always, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully, our prospective or current partners get some value out of this and look forward to speaking to you again next week.
Good stuff. Thanks, mate.